Prepare for a fusion of knowledge and exhilaration where education and excitement collide.
Taking you on an adventure that expands your mind and speaks to your spirit.
I'm Master Nick.
I'm Lady D.
We are the Dom Life.
This podcast contains sexually explicit topics and adult content.
It is intended for listeners 18 and older.
The opinions expressed in this podcast are ours alone, based on our personal thoughts, feelings, and experiences.
We understand that others may have different opinions and experiences, and we respect that. We would love to hear from you. You can reach out to us at www.thedomlife.com.
Now, let's talk a little bit about rope.
Yep.
So we talked about, obviously the whole episode has been about rope, but let's get into some educational stuff about rope. And we're going to kind of let you talk a little bit about some things. Tell us some things.
Yep.
So I listened to your podcast, the
Yes.
18th one on rope, and I think you all did a really great job of covering a lot of the basic safety stuff.
Okay, cool.
So I approach rope and kink with like a rack perspective, with a risk-aware consensual kink perspective. And you all talked about this as well, that it's really hard to say that rope is safe because it doesn't matter what you do. It really just isn't.
Correct.
Kink in general isn't safe. You can't even say driving is safe because there's risks that come with everything that we do. You know, every
Absolutely.
time you get on the road, there's a chance that you're going to be rear-ended or, hit a deer or whatever it might be. And the same thing is true with rope. Every time you pull out rope, no matter what you're doing with it, there's always a risk of injury. But my approach to rope is to identify the risks and then figure out how to mitigate those risks within my risk profile and then the risk profile of all of the people involved as well, which sometimes includes the venue we're playing at.
Okay.
So that's kind of like how I approach rope and rope safety as far as that goes. And you all talked about nerve damage as well. So it can be cumulative or sudden. You can build it up over time, or maybe it's something that happens in an instance. It can be permanent or it can be temporary. It can be caused by compressive forces. So just the rope on the skin restricting an area, pressing down on an area creates that compressive force.
Right.
And then shearing forces is when you're moving the flesh through the rope or against the rope, can also cause damage. So pretty much any way that you move in rope, and just being in rope itself can cause damage.
Right.
And then those nerves can be motor or sensory. So sometimes they control how we move and sometimes they just control sensations. And I think that's the part that can be really scary about rope, is talking about all of the nerve damage that can happen and all of the ways that all of the effects that can have. But like we said, everything we do comes with risks. So the important part is like learning how to mitigate those risks. Like, how do you tie? Well, you use non-collapsing ties that don't constrict the body.
Right.
And if you choose not to, then you go take a class and learn how to do that.
Right.
And you use doubled over rope. So you double the surface area. You have safety shears or some other cutting device nearby in case of emergency. You covered so much in the 18th
Yay!
episode. I was like, they're answering all the questions that they sent me to answer on this podcast interview.
We did a lot of homework. We took a lot of what you said.
We took a lot
From
because
your
one
boot
of the
camp.
things that didn't come up was you had said cutting off rope can cause more damage than untying it naturally, because you're instantly releasing that tension or the tightness, and that can do damage as well. And that stuck with me because I would have been like, get it off, just get it off, because I would think on the end of panic, right? So for me, it's not my physical response, it's my mental response for being tied. So my first thing is panic to being restrained. We were at a dungeon and they were sucking out all the air from those bags. Do you know what I'm
A
talking about?
vacuum bed.
The latex things.
Woo! I was like, I'm not ever doing that. Like, I can't breathe watching that person doing it.
Right. Going back to that, like I said, we did a lot of homework on it. we sat and kind of replayed your boot camp. Okay, what did she say about this and what was said about that? And then I have 12 years of past medical training. So I was able to pull out a lot of stuff there. And then, like I said, Google was our friend. Okay, well, what happens if you do this? And all right, we put that in there. But we did put a whole lot of homework into that episode, trying to cover the safety side of it, because we could teach the safety side. We can't teach rope, but we can at least teach you a safe way of approaching rope so you can start dabbling in it. So now,
Tell us
having
about,
you here, now it's time to get in. So I'm going to go back earlier. You mentioned single column, and I know this is a podcast and it's audio and nobody's going to be able to see it. But what I would like is for you to just try to describe what a single column is and kind of describe what a double column is. I think that was the two knots that I learned, that day.
Yes, I can. I think the easiest way to learn rope is to book a in-person private lesson. I think that's like top tier
Right.
education. And then if you
Absolutely.
can't do that, then book a class. And then if you can't, there's a lot of resources online. Shibari Study has a lot of videos, and all of their like Rope 101 videos are for free. Otherwise, Shibari Study is like a paid subscription. There's also rope365.com, which is also for free and shows pictures and links to videos on how to do the ties. And then Riggers and Rope Sluts on FetLife have tons of links to resources as well. So there's like lots of resources for like watching how to do it.
Do you do private lessons?
I do. Yeah.
And then how do they book it? Through like one of the ways that we're putting, they can reach out to you
just
through.
message me. Yeah.
Right.
There's a lot of people in rope who will teach private lessons. As far as it is the most costly of everything, of all the options. People will charge usually in this region anywhere from $50 to $200 for 2 hours, which is like, I think, kind of standard lesson length. So that can be like the most expensive kind, whereas a $10 ticket gets you into Bite Night and you get Rope 101 for the $10 in a group setting.
But once you get to a certain stage, so if I'm there and I'm learning the basic ropes, but now we're going to start wanting to get into suspension, I think that a private lesson would make a lot of sense for education.
Yes.
The private lessons that I teach tend to focus on suspension and gearing up for suspension. So for me, at the risk of sounding like I'm gatekeeping, and maybe I am, but for me to personally feel comfortable teaching someone something, I have kind of some standards that I want people to meet, because I feel a little bit of personal responsibility if I teach somebody something and then they go out and misuse it and harm someone.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So in a private setting sense, and what I request people who attend like a Gravity boot camp in person with me, which is our like suspension boot camp, similar to beginner boot camp, just with suspension, is that they have extensive rope safety knowledge. So they've taken the Rope 101 safety, but also done some research on their own. And it's especially important that tops, bottoms, and self-tires kind of have an idea of what good pain versus bad pain feels like and how to get that information out of their partner. And that they have solid foundational rope skills and rope handling on the floor. And that's a very Western approach to rope education, because in a lot of traditional Eastern Shibari style approaches, you start with suspension. And everything that you learn is kind of based off of that, which just blows my mind, because the safety risks are so much higher the moment you start putting weight into a tie.
Right.
And then I also ask that people know 2 suspension-worthy upper body harnesses, 2 suspension-worthy lower body harnesses, and then also what makes them suspension-worthy. So those are kind of like my prereqs before I teach someone suspension. And like I said, I do it in a class setting from time to time, but private lessons are definitely my favorite way to teach someone, because I can be there to spot for them in the moment and
Right.
help them hand over hand as much as needed. And I can help kind of mitigate some risks from the outside looking in that they might be
Right.
overwhelmed looking for when they're managing so many other things.
So I can see a pro to that, a positive side. Go back to me trying to learn how to play guitar.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, you can find all this on YouTube and websites and FetLife.
But your fingers
However,
just didn't.
for me, I wanted somebody there. So I didn't pick up a bad habit that would cause future problems.
And you just don't know
Right.
sometimes.
So you can watch a YouTube video and like, yeah, I got that. But if you start doing something wrong, the fact of having somebody there that can immediately say, whoa, you're fixing to mess up and this is why, that's a huge positive side to having somebody there. Now, going back to your prerequisites, let's say we wanted to schedule a private lesson on suspension, but we didn't have those prerequisites. Would we be able to purchase a private lesson and you come and teach us those prerequisites?
Yep.
So
And
it's-
that's what a lot
okay.
of people do is they'll schedule private lessons with me and we work on the building blocks to build up to suspension. And then they learn how to do that.
Okay. I
through
just wanted to,
after a few
I
lessons.
didn't know if it was, no, I'm not coming until you know this, but you are also willing to go and teach the requirements that you
I
are
have
wanting.
taught rope 101 in private settings.
Okay.
Yeah, as a private lesson. There are some people that, and when people contact me and they're like, hey, I really want a private lesson, but I've never touched rope before. The first thing I tell them is that I am more than happy to teach them a rope 101 in a private setting, but it's going to be more cost effective if they can come to a class.
Right.
But not everybody wants to. Not everybody wants to do that in a class setting. And some people just learn better one-on-one
Yes.
and they don't want to waste their
me.
time
That
and
was
money.
Master Nick at the
Going to a
at the
class.
class. I mean, he did learn. It was nice, but he definitely is one on
Right.
one.
Because once something doesn't go right, if I don't have somebody there and I try it again and it goes wrong the second time, I'm done. I'm
Yeah.
I'm gonna do something else.
You're not
Because
alone.
Once I start getting frustrated, it's done. It's over with, and that's why at a lot of the other rope classes we've been to, you've seen me just standing in the corner with my arms crossed. I'm done. You know, if I'm done, pissed off. I didn't learn it. I'm gonna find something different to do.
And even if I have a TA, like one for every 10 people, there's still people that,
Right.
they run into, there is no coming back. There's no recovering from that. They are done after the first thing that they struggle with.
And again, and then it's, for me, again, it's the perception. If you're tying it on you to show me how to tie it on me, I'm now looking at it backwards from how I have to do it.
The other thing that I think is important to include when we're talking about safety for rope and the reason that lessons can be a really great thing is because everything in rope is so contextual. So it all depends on how you're using the rope. Like we said, typically when we're talking about rope 101 safety, we say, oh, you should use non-collapsing ties. You don't want the tie to collapse onto the body. But then the moment you start talking about sadistic rope, we're going to be using lark's heads. We're going to be intentionally collapsing the ties down onto the body, right? We break the rules. So
Right.
sometimes you have to learn the boundaries so that you can color outside the lines too. And sometimes that can be hard to navigate if you're newer to rope.
Right.
So having somebody that can help you with the context and figuring out the purpose of everything that you're doing and how you're doing it and how it's going to interact in the way that you're using it with your person or yourself.
That makes total sense.
Yep.
That does. That gives more credence to why you would need it because, again, we don't do this. Nope, we don't do this until we do it.
Right.
That's the world we kind of live in.
Yep.
Okay, so what is the area in that you are willing to go generally for private lessons?
Depends on how much I'm getting paid.
That is a perfect answer because that is 100% true. You're willing to travel a further distance when
If-
it's worth your
if they're willing to pay it.
financially worth it.
Right.
And I tell people that I am more than willing to skill share for free and share what I've learned for free. But that means it's on my terms. It's at an event that I'm at. It just happens to be a time where I feel like sharing knowledge and I
Right.
have the spoons and the time to do that.
Right.
And that's not always the case. A lot of times I'm tired or I'm in hosting mode or I have a bunch of plans. So private lessons for me, people book private lessons with me when they want to have my undivided attention and they're working on their goals and we're prioritizing the things that they want to learn. And I'm there as like an instructional tool to help them meet their goals in rope.
Right.
So most of the lessons that I teach are in my living room. I have a couple portable aerial rigs. So even for suspension based lessons, those can still happen in my living room. And the requirement is that I meet somebody in a vanilla setting first. And as long as we jive and all that good stuff and get along, then they'll come over and have a private rope lesson. But I also will travel to teach. And a lot of that is just making sure that my expenses are met and that it's worth my time to go.
Right. Absolutely. If it's not worth your time or anything like that, then yeah, there's no reason in doing it.
Right.
All right. What type of rope is best for somebody wanting to dabble in rope play? I know at your I know at your boot camp, I think the word was Rope Depot.
Dom Depot.
Dom Depot.
Dom Depot.
So believe it or
He
not,
literally was like, "Where is
there
Dom
is
Depot?"
there is a Dom Depot, but they do not sell rope. Just so you know.
Saying like,
I was
"Where's
so mad.
Dom
I was so mad.
Depot?"
I'm sitting back here on my phone going, where the hell is this damn place they're talking about? I can't find it.
She meant Home Depot, but Dom Depot.
I think sometimes I have some narrow, spicy, dry humor. So I'm glad that someone else took it seriously, though.
Yeah, I did. I Googled it. It does exist. They do not
Because
sell
we
rope.
did not come with good rope, and it was apparent immediately. But our friend Zora and Dante did have good rope, so I had a section of good rope that made a difference. We
Yeah.
realized pretty quickly how bad the other rope was, but we had never done it before. This was rope we had here for other things.
Yeah.
I think the best rope for like rope style bondage is whatever rope you have in your hands. And there's lots of classes that teach how to use packaging tape and bondage tape and socks and
Right.
scarves and whatever to explore like the world of bondage.
Wow.
When you get into, and it all depends on how you're using it as well, right?
Yes, because suspension, and you like tell me for suspension, what kind of rope you recommend.
So personally, I use POSH for uplines. It stands for Port Out Starboard Home. It's a synthetic rope that comes from the marine rigging world because it's really incredibly strong. And in suspension, it's not just about the weight of the person that you're putting in rope, because that's a static load, right? When you stand on the scale, you see a number, but when you jump on the scale, you see a much higher number.
Right.
And the same thing can happen in suspension. If you're just standing still or just like laying in the suspension, then you have that static load. But the moment you start transitioning and moving the body, through the air and against the rope and whatnot, then you're creating those dynamic loads, and it exerts more force on the rope than just the person's weight alone. But I also say that kind of hypocritically that I use POSH because I also use jute as my
Jute.
for
That's another-
my harnesses.
right.
Yeah. And jute has a breaking strength of about 200 pounds per strand. So, which is not a lot, but it goes up. It can handle a lot more when you're tying it into a harness and you're reinforcing, you're doubling things over, you're double or triple wrapping things. Your attachment points are spreading the load. The way that the harness is designed spreads the load as well. So that's personally what I like, because jute handles better than most of the ropes that I've tied with, but POSH is much stronger, which makes it, I feel, safer doing a lot of the
Right.
ridiculous suspension things, minimalistic suspension things using POSH.
Do you have a specific company or brand that you buy from?
Oh, so my favorite jute that I've ever used has been Moko Jute, and they used to be really popular back in the day, but he has had a lot of things happen in his personal life, and he's no longer making nor selling rope. So I have a kit of Moko Jute that I keep tucked away for when I'm feeling nostalgic. And it's very worn, and it's like a foreplay only kind of kit. That's probably my favorite. The last several years I've used my Nawashi because it's really cheap and it's fairly good quality for what it is. It's like $6 a hank or $8 a hank. It's on Etsy, and they're really great. I think they're based out of Texas. My only complaint about their rope is that it compresses down. So I order 6mm, but it feels much smaller than 6mm. So I have been considering and shopping around and looking at other jute, and I've been considering, getting a different kit, but I'm so torn because there's so many good options out there.
Right.
Right.
Okay. I know you, Lady D, went to Knothead and purchased her ropes.
And I have some knothead nylon. I have some Chroma Knots nylon as well.
Nylon. So yes, that's what she got was nylon, and main reason being she wanted all the pretty colors.
Yep. My kit of knothead, I like Chroma Knots and knothead nylon both. And I have a kit from knothead because they had, I think it's the peacock teal is what I have. It's either mermaid or peacock teal, but I think I have the peacock teal. And it's like the prettiest colors, turquoise with little hints of green and blues in it.
Yep.
I got the whole UV reactive set because I was like, I just like the way it looks. And mainly it's going to be harnesses and stuff like that. I'm not even close to the point where I'm suspending. My understanding was that kind of rope is not really safe because it doesn't lock the same way other rope does.
It totally is suspension worthy.
Okay.
So there's like there's two categories of rope, and one of them is synthetic rope. So that's going to be your nylons, your Posh, your Hempex. It's all of the man-made ropes. And in general, those ropes can get wet. They're super strong. They're going to last a really long time, and they're all suspension worthy because they're so much stronger. And then your natural fiber ropes are going to be hemp and jute and cotton and those sorts of things. They tend to not do as well if they get wet. They tend to be weaker. They often handle better to most rope snobs. So that's why we hang on to them. Nylon for me is slippery. And you have to lock off sometimes in different ways or just add some extra locks to make sure that your frictions and hitches and locks aren't going to slip. But nylon is super strong. I got it for water bondage.
Oh.
So, yeah. I was going on a vacation to Gatlinburg with a bunch of friends and partners, and one of them asked me to tie her up and throw her in a hot tub. So I got a kit of nylon. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Have you ever played with coconut rope?
I love coconut rope. It's
I had a
$4.88 for 50 feet at Dom Depot. It will draw blood if you use it correctly. I mean, if you use it viciously. And it's so cheap that I just cut it off and throw it away when I'm done. Yeah, I love
I had
coconut
a
rope.
piece of coconut rope.
Don't ask me where it is. I did not hide it.
I don't know what happened to it.
You don't look guilty at all.
I mean, it was only like 5 or 6
We
feet
had
long.
gotten
It
it
was a
during the
class.
thing.
It
Yeah,
was a class that we had
class.
done. I think it was a class Apollo had done in Cincinnati.
Yes.
And
Sounds right.
So he handed them out. I was like, "Ooh, I like this," because the minute she grabbed it, she goes, "Oh no, I don't like this." Well, hand it
I'm
here.
a
then.
sensory.
I like
I'm a
that.
sensory kid, so it was like, oh, yeah.
Yeah. If you ever want a Dexter scene, a flogger made out of coconut rope will get the job done.
How?
Great idea.
Oh, God bless.
I'm going to have to
this
reach out to Bear.
podcast.
I'm going to have to reach out to Bear and see if I can't get a coconut rope flogger. Thank you for that great idea.
You're very welcome. That's what I'm here for.
Isn't it? That does not make me happy. I'm just saying. I know that you're going to do this too. I can see it.
Oh yeah. If I have to make it myself, I will.
We've made some. He's made some. So we talked about a couple of knots. You've mentioned the name. So if we were going from 101 basic, what are some that are the next level that they can like Google? Our listeners can Google and watch a video on the knots.
So in a 101, I teach a Somerville single column, a Somerville Bolin as a single column. And there's lots of different kinds of single columns, and none of them are right or wrong necessarily. It's just how you use it. But the reason that I choose a Somerville is because some of the other single columns will collapse if you pull them in a certain direction, and a Somerville will not if you've tied it correctly. So if it collapses when you've tied it, you've done it wrong. And I think that's really important for people very like new to rope to be able to know.
Right.
Is that if it's collapsing, you've done it wrong, back up, watch the video again.
Right.
Now,
That's a good way.
When you're saying collapsing, I want to make sure that we paint a clear picture for this. So when you say collapsing means you tied the knot, but it still has potential of tightening even further. So it's moving itself closer to the body.
Yes.
That is what you mean by
and
collapsing.
the rope is constricting the body. Yeah.
Okay.
So the ties that I teach, the like single column ties that I teach in a 101 are non-collapsing ties. So they create space in the cuff so that the rope is tied to itself and not actually on the body. So the body is trapped in the rope because the rope is tied around it, but it's not tied to it.
Gotcha.
So, which is what makes it so different than, we get a lot of people at 101 that they're like, oh, I was in Boy Scouts, or I've, can sail a boat or whatever. And that rope is typically something that collapses onto the thing that it's tied onto.
Right.
Whereas in Shibari style of tying, that's not typically what we want to do. Of course, there's exceptions, but typically the rope is tied and secured to itself, and it just happens to be around the body.
Gotcha.
So I do a Somerville bowline for the single column in Rope 101, and it's not the easiest one to learn, but I think it's the easiest one to figure out if you did it right or wrong. And it's not going to collapse if you've tied it correctly. And then we do a double column. And again, there's lots of different versions. I do like a bula bula style double column. It's just like an overhand knot, which is a lot easier than I think a Somerville. But I teach the Somerville first because if people are going to get frustrated with it, they're going to have more patience for that right there at the beginning of the class.
Yep,
And then they typically, except for you,
I'd be
sorry.
I'd be out. Find me in the corner.
But you did it. And you made it to the double column, and the double column is a lot easier. And so then people are like, oh, okay. And then like the rest of the class is cake. So then after that, we talk about bottoming basics and like building body awareness and advocating for yourself and communicating in rope is part of the bottoming basics. And then we talk about tying with intent. And we talk about how even if you don't know how to tie anything at all, you're still capable of picking up a piece of rope and running it across someone's skin, or using it to push them down, or to have this connective experience. And at this point, like, I'm just holding a hank of rope. Like, I haven't actually tied a single column, a double column, or anything, but I start interacting with my person to show them that you can have this experience.
Right.
And then we talk about crossing munner hitches, which is a way to build stability in rope. So we start with a single column or double column anywhere on the body, and we start experimenting with moving the body and creating stability through body motion and movement. And then as the rope crosses itself on the body, then we add those crossing munner hitches. And then after we run out of rope, I teach them how to join rope.
We did that.
Yep, you did that. And then I teach a half hitch lock off because that's a really universal, easy lock off.
Right. We did that too.
So that's like the 101.
What I really liked was when you were wrapping it, you're like, there's really no wrong way. Like, I'm wrapping it around your body. There's no wrong way until it crosses over and you show how to tie. You're like, I can wrap it kind of here or there. I can get the arm tied up in through, and it was very interesting to watch because everybody wants it so rigid. I want a structure. Show me how to do this. But you're like, you don't have to. I can tie you. I'm just spinning her around, putting it, it was good.
And having those elaborate patterns are so valid, and it teaches you so much about rope. But also, I think most people that come to rope just want to learn how to connect with their person. And you don't have to know fancy rope knots to be able to do that with a piece of rope. You really don't. And so, I tell people when we do this exercise in Rope 101 to keep in mind like the vulnerable parts of the body, but also context, right? We're on the floor. They're not going to be in it for very long. We're probably not going to have a lot of like ultra violent movements, that's going to harm people, at the floor of Rope 101, So just like experiment with it and have fun. And then after 101, then we move into those 102 ties. So all of those ties, you take all of those basics and then you give them another step or two. And those are kind of the building blocks of all of those more elaborate harness ties. So of course, all of the 101 ties are also building blocks, but to like build on that, we talk about forward versus reverse tension.
Okay.
We talk about creating locks and quick releases and securing things with like Yuki fixes, which gives you more options for like what to do with the rest of your rope. We talk about Hojo cuffs and inline single columns. So how to create a single column after you've already used the middle of the rope. We talk about reinforcing stems, and we start to kind of build the concepts of patterns with having like double wraps and having a stem and creating some frictions to help hold everything together to have a more structured tie.
All right. Now I got a lot more terms to Google.
That sounds like a lot.
Hey, you
That's
all learned
perfect.
most of those in the beginner boot camp because beginner boot camp is 101, 102, basic bottoming, and tying with intent. Those
Yeah,
are the 4
and-
classes.
I'd say
in
a lot of
the
those
boot
that you
camp.
mentioned, I remember hearing. I couldn't remember exactly where I heard it, but I remembered hearing them. But I knew I was still over there tying my single column and double columns while y'all was there.
That's okay. Yeah, like I said, beginner boot camp is 4 classes shoved together. So it's that 101 plus all the ties that I just listed for 102 and those 2
Right.
other classes.
Yeah.
Right.
Perfect.
So what is the purpose of a harness? Why would somebody want a harness?
So for me, harnesses are, of course, important when you're talking about suspension because you need something stable that you can lock off to use in your suspension. But they can also be really fun on the floor as well. A lot of the ways that I use harnesses on the floor are just fancy handles, so I can grab my person and throw them around.
Right. And that was
We watched that at
we
the
watched that
dungeon.
at the dungeon, yes. Somebody tied a harness and had a handle,
Milady K.
and they could just walk up, grab that handle, and lead them around where they want to.
Yeah.
There is also a lot of aesthetics in a harness and multiple ways of making it and designing it and whatever patterns you want. I know there's some that kind of accentuate the boob area. You can really make a great set of boobs look even better with the right harness. And there's just multiple ways. So there's really not one certain way of doing it. Once you learn the knots and the do's and the don'ts of what areas to go around and what no go around, then it's kind of your own artistic mind
Yep.
as far as how it looks, correct?
Yeah, yeah. I think the other reasons that I use harnesses are for restriction and control as well. So I like taking people's hands away, and then once you start taking away the mobility of the body, it's a lot easier to move the body because there's less resistance.
Right. Right. So you can use the harness and tie their arms up along with the harness. And then, yeah, okay.
We saw the
Another
one
idea.
where they had I couldn't do it. My arms don't stretch like that.
Like the bunny
but-
tie
oh
where
my-
they take the wrists behind
Oh
the
God,
heads.
yeah. I can't. Like I literally don't function that way anymore.
But you don't have to get the full position to have the full effect of the rope, right?
Right.
Like that's the thing about rope is it can be for literally anybody who wants rope because as long as you're taking that rope to the edge of whatever the mobility is, like you're going to get the same
Right.
effect because the point is that you can't pull your hands back over your head.
Right.
So it doesn't matter if your arms go all the way to your
back.
neck or
Got
just
it.
slightly behind. Yeah.
Yeah. So my thinking is it doesn't work on me because I can't get my arms back there, but they're back.
Yep.
As long as they're partially back, then
Once
it's going to work.
you get them back here
Still
to
effective.
your point, yeah, you still can't bring them forward anymore. So yeah, that was
That's
All right.
crazy. So what is your favorite, like when you're tying, what's your favorite thing that you do? What tie, harness, leg, what's the favorite thing you do?
A single column. That's a really lame answer, but I think it's a thing that I tie more than anything. It's just something to lock off to the body and then just use the rest of rope. So single columns are so versatile and I like them a lot. The other thing that I really like, the other tie that I really like is a Moco hip harness. So it's a hip harness that uses a lot of Munter hitches. And any hip harness really can go on the hips or the waist and then also have thigh cuffs. And then there's some sort of support that kind of ties it all together.
Okay.
Literally. So in the Moco hip harness, it's Munter hitches. So it's Hojo cuffs. It's a single column, Munter hitches, Hojo cuffs, and a half hitch lock off, which are all things that you learn in 101.
Okay.
So it's just piecing those things together into a harness.
When we tied around the waist, you did tell people try it on your hip or lift it up to your waist and where is it more comfortable for you, because some people like it right at their waist and some people are more comfortable when it was on their hip. And I found that really interesting that it's a known thing that it's typically one or the other. You're going to be more comfortable in one or the other.
Yeah, I am a waist person. I want all that restriction. I have childbearing hips that will never be used for childbearing, but like I have shelves there. It is made for rope to sit on it.
I'm
But
happier when it's on my hips below that waistline. Because once
Yeah.
it's up at my waist, when it's at my stomach area, it's uncomfortable for me.
that's how my partner, the Grim Journey, is. When I put waist rope on him, he's like, it's squishing my internal organs.
It does. I agree with that
So
100%.
he's
Even
exclusively
just
a
the
hip rope
push
person.
against it, I'm like, yeah.
Yeah. But that's just different anatomy and what works better and feels better for different people.
Right.
All
And the
right.
shape
So
of
now
their
I'm all
pelvis.
ready to start suspending
All right.
myself and others.
You want me to get the rigging out? You want me to
No.
drop the chains from the ceiling?
We do have chains in our well, we don't have chains in the ceiling. We have
We have tie
Oh,
points.
multiple in our in our space.
I love that for you.
Yeah. So if I were ready to suspend, which I obviously am not, although it sounds so awesome. Hey, maybe I'm Japanese. Maybe I could do it the Japanese way.
I'm sure you can.
All right. So, what are some things to watch for when you're beginning in suspension? What are some things that are, the warnings, like, here's your warning before you start this?
Yeah. So in the Gravity Boot Camp or like the Suspension 101s, and I also teach this as a standalone class too, but being able to assess hard points and rigging and all of the equipment and gear are really important. So we talked about dynamic versus static loads. So standing on a scale is one number, jumping on a scale is something else. So that's the first is a static load and the latter is dynamic. So that impacts rope in a suspension context but it also applies not only to like the rope that you're tying the body with, but also the upline, but also like any carabiner or gear or like bolt that you're using, not to mention the rig itself. Like that applies to everything. So you have to know to look for the safety ratings that are on everything. And you also have to consider what safety factor you're personally comfortable working in. Like in a professional rigging environment, it's typically 10-1. So you want everything that is holding a person in the air to be able to handle 10 times that person's weight.
Okay.
In reality, in like the bondage that you're going to see in most dungeon spaces, we're not coming close to 10-1.
Right.
But that's like all risk profile and what you're comfortable taking and how narrow of a margin you're willing to work on. And, just thinking about, okay, well, if this rig does fail, if this rope fails, like what are the results of that? And that's the hardest part about suspension. It's not the knots and lock-offs and how to tie a basket. It's knowing all of the risks of things that could go wrong and how to respond in any of those scenarios.
Right.
Because something will go wrong at some point. So when we're talking about assessing loads, we're talking about working load limits, which is what the piece of equipment or rope is designed to handle. But you also have your minimum breaking strength, which is what something can handle before it fails. And that all plays into safety factors as well. And then a lot of that is measured in kilonewtons, which is 224.8 pounds of force is 1 kilonewton. So learning all of those terms and how they work together is a big part.
So now
of
you're
that.
throwing math in it. I'm out.
Yep.
I'm done.
So sorry. Physics and math, that is suspension. So part of like the safety aspects of suspension is assessing all of the gear and knowing how to do that. But then you also have to assess your harnesses as well. You have to know what makes your harness suspension worthy and why it's suspension worthy. And is it going to be sustainable for your person? Is it going to equally spread out the load, or is it going to load something really heavy? And what's the impact on the body? Is it going to restrict their breathing? Is it going to, cause weird circulation things that might make them dizzy? Is like, how are they going to move through this? Like, does the body move like that? Some body parts don't bend in just any direction. So you have to be able to understand
true.
that and plan ahead. Are there reinforced stems on your harness? Are there wraps doubled over? Are there friction hitches and notch that create structure? And is your harness designed in a way that's going to hold its integrity after there's load placed on it that might displace some of those things? Is it going to
So if it
remain its
shifts
structure?
slightly or something,
Yeah. Is your person going to fall out of it? Yeah. Or is
that
it
would
gonna,
be bad. It would
yeah.
it would just generally be bad,
Right.
especially since you blindfold them.
Right. Surprise.
They don't even get to see themselves
Crash landing.
falling.
Yeah. So that's the other part. And then when we get to actually building an upline, there's different ways to do it. My preference is that when we're doing a suspension, this is also going to sound really egotistical and gatekeeping. I can tell when somebody is self-taught on how to suspend because they often just use whatever rope is left over from their harness and go right into the suspension. And they're kind of like looping and weaving and making things up. That's a lot of times because that's how it looks if you're reverse engineering things. But in more formal, traditional shibari, your upline is actually a separate piece of rope. So you're creating a basket. Some people also call it a hanger that attaches that new piece of rope onto the harness. And you can build the basket in lots of different ways so that it loads the harness in different ways so that it feels different on the body.
Okay.
So you have your basket or your hanger, which attaches the rope to the harness. Then you actually have the upline, which goes up and over your hard point and probably loops through to create a pulley system. So it goes
Right.
back down to your basket or hanger. So that way it's easier to lift the person or limb or whatever. Then you have a lock that holds all of that in place and creates tension. And then you have some sort of finishing cleanup that keeps the upline from just unraveling. So those are kind of the 4 parts of an upline. And then the last part that I really talk about in a gravity boot camp is like tips and tricks for your first flight. So
I like that. My first flight.
yeah.
I need that first flight.
Yeah. And this is for like bottoms or all of this is so applicable for bottoms, tops, or self tires. For a first flight, I usually encourage people to do some sort of partial where they're putting their person or themselves in the harness. They're creating the upline. They're locking everything off with the person still supporting most of their own weight. And then that allows the bottom to sink down into the tie, or maybe they actively bottom and push one of their limbs down into a tie to kind of lift the rest of their body off the ground. That gives the person in the rope total control. And it's
Right.
also really low risk because they can go slow. You can watch for anything shifting or moving as you go. It's not just this sudden, ta-da, you're in the air and there's no way out, right?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
kind of helps create that kind of helps create a bottom-led experience in a first flight. The other tip that I give for first flights is that you should be no more than 60 seconds from down. And if the top can't untie a upline in less than 60 seconds, then they need to go back to practicing on inanimate objects, which is also something that we do in gravity boot camps. Is the first thing we suspend is our own rope bags, right? Because if something goes
Right.
wrong and you drop that, it's not a big deal.
Right.
They get to practice the motions on something that is inanimate.
Right.
And then we go
Wow.
into our first flight with an actual person. And at that point, untying an upline should not take a lot of thought. So we should be able to untie an upline and get a foot on the ground in 60 seconds. Making sure that that space is really collaborative. I loved the conversation that you all had about needing to be able to talk to your person and give honest feedback to your person.
Right.
I also use the traffic light system for safe words and rope. But safe words and rope are different than safe words in so many other kinks.
Correct.
If you call red in a spanking scene, the next spank just doesn't happen.
Right.
But if you call red in a suspension scene, you're still in the air.
Right.
You're not magically down.
Right.
And like we were talking about before, if you cut the rope, you could actually be creating shearing forces that could be causing nerve damage, or being dropped and falling out of rope because you've cut up
Yeah.
lines
Right.
can also be high risk.
Oh.
And then the last thing
Have
that I recommend for suspension is spotters. So regardless of whether you're self-tying or if you're just new to suspension, having someone that's not actively a part of the scene but standing a little bit distance away can help mitigate things like crowd interaction if you are tying in a space, because that can be really distracting, or just watching for things that you might not realize. Like some of the reasons that I've seen spotters step into scenes is when a piece of rope comes loose or whatever and like inches up towards someone's neck, and maybe the people in the scene don't see that from their perspective.
Yeah, you may not even feel it because you're focused on another part of your body or something.
But that might be a reason for like a spotter to step in, or maybe somebody drops something and they can't reach it and a spotter can pick it up and hand them back. Of course, spotters are also really useful in taking pictures for you so that you can post it on FetLife and prove that you did the rope thing.
That's awesome. Have you ever had a situation where somebody did say red, like we've got to get out of this quick?
Yes. I'm trying to think if anybody has specifically said the word red. So there is like a saying in rope that it's not a matter of if something goes wrong, it's when something has gone wrong.
Correct.
And if somebody tells you that they've never had an issue in rope, then they're either more inexperienced than they're leading you to believe, or they're just plain lying. So I've had tons of things go wrong. I've had people throw up. I've had people pass out. I've had a cut rope before. I've almost tore off someone's ears one time, which was a joint scene thing. Like it's, there's things that happen and you learn from it and you admit your mistakes and you learn how to do better and you move on from it.
Right.
And you take precautions and do things differently next time. So I've definitely had people call red. And for me as a top, I always communicate with my bottoms that the best way to communicate in rope is just plain English. So when I'm navigating, especially a suspension scene, I often ask what sucks. Because that gives them an opportunity to say my ankle.
Right.
And I try to be really direct. And sometimes if they're like, I don't know everything, I'm like, okay, does that wrist wrap suck? Does your chest harness suck? What hurts more, your hips or your foot? That way that gives me some direction on what to change. And then sometimes I'll also ask what's good, what feels really nice. If they tell me their chest harness is really sustainable, I'm going to leave that alone. Right. I'm not going to mess with that. So I know for me that if we get to the point where my partner calls red, they are really overstimulated. More things are feeling not comfortable and
sustainable. Because you've already been checking in all along.
We've already been checking in and they've already probably been communicating that there's issues. So if they get overstimulated to the point where they've called red, it's just, I need to get them down in the way that's least painful. And sometimes that's really hard because in the situations that's happened with, it's with bottoms that I've worked with for a really long time. We're doing something more complex than 60 seconds from down. It might get worse before we get to the floor, and they know that, they consent to that. That's something that we talk about, but it's also hard for me as a top to be like, okay, it's going to get worse before I can fix it.
Right.
So sorry about that.
So in your suspension at Kinktasia, where you were both suspended, both of you were doing a lot of activities to get your bodies moved around. How hard is that? Is it difficult to because you guys made it look easy, but there was a lot of movement.
There was a lot of laughter in my living room while our partners watched and just mocked us because we were just trying to figure things out and lab things out. We're both primarily self-tires, so that makes it a little bit easier because we're more accustomed to moving our own bodies in rope, but it can be really disorienting when you're in the air and upside down and spinning around and blindfolded. Yeah, it took some practice to be able to navigate all those things. And I really wish that at some point during all of this, we had asked people to like take photos for us or video it or something, because sometimes people will compliment me on something and I actually have no idea how it looked. It felt nice to me.
Right.
That's what's important to me. And if it looked cool to other people, then that's a bonus.
Yeah. Treble and Jade and Vegas Dave had said, please take photos. Yep. And I had taken a bunch of videos and photos since I'm friends with her and send that off because you want to see it. Right. And you definitely wanted to see yours, even though you didn't get to.
Yeah. I've heard that we didn't do bad. So
yeah, no.
Again, excellent performance. And I would love to see it again. So on that note, what is your next convention or performance or anything? Do you have anything coming up?
The best way to keep up with the things that I'm doing is probably to check FetLife. I have an upcoming events section on my FetLife that I keep really up to date.
Okay.
So I think the next thing that I'm doing in Louisville that'll be big is we'll do another beginners boot camp probably around January. And then I'll probably teach in January as well.
Awesome. So make sure and check it out. And also for our listeners, for me, even sitting here and have dabbled a little bit in rope, a lot of the stuff you said, a lot of the terminology, it sounds intimidating. It sounds very intimidating, even for me, knowing a little bit about it. So if you are new, if you are wanting to learn, don't let anything SnapGender has said today intimidate you. Once you get in with the right instructor and the right classes and start learning all this, I'm going to assume for majority of people that come there, pick up on it rather quickly and can progress on. So don't be intimidated by any of it. It is a lot of fun. It is very artistic. It is a crowd drawer. You will get a huge crowd if you pull out rope, whether you're at a swingers club, whether you're at a BDSM convention. The rope people always seem to have the biggest crowd.
It's so beautiful and amazing, and the differences of stuff that
Yes.
we've seen, and when you're good at it, it goes quick. When you're us, it goes slow.
Yep.
It's okay. It still looks great in the end.
Absolutely.
And it doesn't matter what your experience level is. Like rope really is for anybody who's interested in it. And it doesn't have to be like the show-stopping complex thing to have a really novel like experience with rope.
Well,
Right.
in our last takeover for Swing Society on Saturday, they wanted me to do the electric wand demonstration. So we had purchased some kind of rig,
Not for suspension.
not for suspension, but
It
we
was
had-
just to do the
it was
electric
just to do
wand.
the electric wand.
So
'cause
you could see
didn't-
both sides.
I didn't want to cross or any of that. So I actually used one of your ties. We're tying the handcuffs, and then I left enough slack to where I could loop it around that rig and tie them off. They wasn't 100% suspended. They had a lot of room. I mean, even in it wasn't tall enough for me to walk under. So it was a little short, but it did keep them contained to a certain area. And they wasn't complete brats that night. They didn't move around a whole lot, but depending on what tool I used on them. But yes, again, if you're interested, you can start small and keep it small, keep it in the bedroom, just learn how to do the bondage, how to tie your partner up. And from there, you can build on it to go all the way up to suspension and doing performances. Is
Okay.
there anything else that you would like to mention for our listeners?
I don't think so.
We covered a lot.
We
We
cover
did
a lot.
cover a lot. Yeah.
I'm so glad you had all of that stuff in your head, able to quickly talk about it, because there were a lot of times where we're not linear in these interviews. We kind of bounce a little bit because you want a natural flow, and you're just amazing. You have so much knowledge.
Yep.
It's my favorite thing to talk about, and I'm so grateful and thankful that you all had me on to to talk about it.
Well, we are so glad you took time out of your busy schedule. I haven't got the bill from you yet, so go easy on us for that. But again, thank you so much for coming here, for sitting down, for talking about rope, for giving our listeners a little bit more education and the right paths to take to get to where they want to be.
Yep. We'll be hiring you. I'm just saying, private lessons coming up soon.
Yep, we'll be transforming our Airbnb to a dungeon.
I make a good Christmas gift.
Husband,
Anniversary, Valentine's
Master
Day,
Nick.
All right.
birthdays.
Well, again, thank you. And we will have all of your contact information and all the stuff that you mentioned. We will have it up on our website so you can go check out SnapGender. Thank you. Hey, Lady D, what's next on our agenda?
Ooh, all things cold, brr, and hot, like you, Master Nick.
You must be talking about temperature play.
I was.
Awesome. It's going to be a perfect episode because the week prior,
To the demonstration at Club Tempted.
that's right, we are once again doing demonstrations for Swinger Society's Club Takeover at Club Tempted. And we're collaborating with Ex Libras, our friends Dante and Zora. They're going to be there with us Friday night and Saturday night for both demos. Stick around, stay tuned. We're going to tell you all about it and how to get involved with temperature play.
Yay! Please follow, like, and share our podcast.
Make sure to visit thedomlife.com, where you can find pictures and other details about the Dom Life podcast. And through the Contact Us button, you can ask questions or provide recommendations for future episodes.
We want to explore your kink too.
Be sure to check out upcoming events to see where our adventures are taking us and our photo gallery to where we've been.
Thank you for joining us on this journey. We hope you had fun listening and learning with us.
Till next time, keep calm and remember your safe word.
Red, red, red.